all, how is everyone? Daylight savings time changes over this Sunday, and it will be lighter next time we meet. Looking forward to that. We are here tonight with Helene Stupinski and Bonnie Siegler to find out what Superman and Marilyn Monroe have in common when they discuss their amazing book, The American Way, a true story of Nazi escape, Superman, and Marilyn Monroe. They will be in conversation with Jenny Altschuler. Helene Stupinski is the national best-selling author of 3 memoirs, The Five-Fingered Discount, Murder in Matera, and Baby Plays Around. She writes regularly for the New York Times. Her work has also appeared in the Washington Post, New York and Travel and Leisure, and dozens of other publications. She teaches at New York University and lives in Brooklyn. Bonnie Siegler is the founder and creative director of the award-winning multidisciplinary graphic design studio, 8½, the author of Dear Client, a guide for people who work with creatives, and Signs of Resistance, a history of protest in America. She taught design in her grad school at Yale and at the School for Visual Arts for many years. She lives in Connecticut. And Jenny Altschuler, who will be moderating tonight, is a photographer and a political activist and has been organizing author events since 2001. She was the coordinator for the Friends of Belmont Library for author series for many years and has been a member of the Brattleboro Literary Festival Committee since 2011. She holds a degree in psychology from Wesleyan and a PhD in developmental psychology from NYU. Welcome, Helene, Bonnie, and Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sandy. Bonnie and Helene, I'm so excited to talk to you. I read the book this week and I listened to it. In fact, it was fantastic to listen to and just immerse myself in. You read it, right?
I read it.
You narrated it. You did a great job. One thing I was thinking, I wanted to first find out, I guess, like what happened when you found the footage from your grandfather. One thing I was wondering is, did you really think it existed and did you not? Like, were you surprised when it appeared?
So, yeah.
Did you think maybe it wasn't real?
No, to back up, my grandfather had told me many times growing up that he had filmed Marilyn Monroe while she was shooting The 7-Year Itch. He was very proud of it, told us lots about it, but we had never seen it. So, he wouldn't lie about something like that, but it could be gone, for all I knew. So when we were cleaning out his apartment, when he was evicted, so we had to move him, and we were going through stuff, and we found a plastic bag filled with loose 16mm film. And we brought it home and put it on a reel-to-reel, and instantly you could see it was her because it was this white dress against a black background, and she's unmistakable. So it was like finding, like what I imagine it's like to find buried treasure, like to hit the treasure chest with your shovel and go like, oh my God, I think this is it. It was very exciting.
So exciting. And he was still alive. So you could tell us what he said when you told him that you found it.
So I called him very excited and I said, Opie, we found the Marilyn footage. And he said, of course you did. But he always knew it was there. It was just a matter of somebody finding it. I was the one who didn't know for sure it existed.
So first, after you found, so what year did you find it in?
2005.
Okay, so the article was until 2017, right?
Right. Yeah, sorry.
So can you just tell what happened in between and then why in 2017 this became a newspaper article?
Sure.
Became a novel.
And we loved it, and we showed it once publicly at a film festival, an outdoor film festival we had at a friend's backyard. But then we just put it away, like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad we have that. We'll save it for our children and grandchildren. And then once people started talking about how there were fine people on both sides, things started to change for me. And I thought it was important to get an article in the New York Times about the Holocaust, about the slow slide to fascism, about what happens when we go in that direction. And so I asked someone if they could recommend an amazing writer who could help me with this article for the New York Times. And they said, there's only one person, Helene Stupinski.
And also to back up, Bonnie's grandfather, the one who took the footage of Marilyn
Yep.
Monroe, escaped from Nazi Germany in 1938.
Right, I'm going to get to that.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
I met with Bonnie, she showed me the footage of Marilyn, but better than the footage of Marilyn was his story. It was just this incredible story about
I
his.
agree.
So.
Marilyn was the way we got people in the door, and then we had the real story.
Right.
Yes, because in the immersion in the story, that's the thing that's really amazing, what happened to your whole family. So just to start with, so when you met for the article, so was it basically Helene just doing an article on the story? And when did you decide to write the book?
Yeah, well, basically what happened was I met with Bonnie, we had lunch, and she showed me the footage on her phone. And it was amazing. It's amazing footage. I mean, he's just a few feet away from her, and it's crystal clear, beautiful, beautiful film.
Wait, actually, should we
show it, right?
Oh yeah, you want to show it?
Why don't we show
Let's
it?
Show it right now. So
Yeah, show it. Do it. I keep talking though. So,
Yeah.
so she shows me this footage, and it's amazing. Then she starts telling me the story about her grandfather, and I'm like, this is an amazing story. So there are two stories. It's about Marilyn Monroe, but it's also about her grandfather and his escape. And so I said, I want to pitch this to the Times. I write for them regularly. And so I pitched it to them. But in the meantime, Trump had won the election. And it was like, you couldn't get a story in the paper. It was like, everything was Trump all the time. So it took a little while, it took a couple months, but finally that January, the story appeared.
The Sunday before his inauguration.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And I think people at that point were looking for a little bit of happiness, and something to sort of distract them. And so the story went viral. It was one of those, it was at the top of the homepage. You push play and there was the footage of Marilyn. And it was one of those stories that just went all over the place. And after that, we became very good friends. We're still very good friends. We talk to each other several times a day. And at one point, Bonnie said, hey, why don't we write a book about my grandfather? And in the meantime, she had found out that her grandfather's financial sponsor to come over from Nazi Germany was a guy named Harry Donenfeld, who was the publisher of Superman comics. And so she kind of knew there was like a rumor about it in her family, but she wasn't sure. And so in those couple of years between the story and we started working on the book, she found out that it was a real thing. And so between those three things, the Nazi escape, Superman, and Marilyn Monroe, we had this amazing pitch. Yeah.
And how did you find out about Harry? Like, did his family get in touch with you from the article, or just your research?
No. Only Marilyn and my grandfather were in the article because we didn't know enough about Harry at that point.
Yeah.
And then somebody had called me a long time ago and said to me, did you know that your grandfather was sponsored by Harry Donenfeld? And I was like, Harry Donen, okay, that's interesting. I Googled him. This is pre-social media really, but I could Google, and there was nothing on the internet about him. So I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I put it away. And then years later, I was interviewing for the article, I guess, a cousin of mine. And I said, did you know anything about this Superman guy? And she said, oh yeah, the Superman guy. He's the one who's responsible for our family being here. Like, okay, so everyone knew this but me? That's how it felt. So, and then other people confirmed it. The Donenfelds had no idea. And they were really happy to find out what a mensch their grandfather was, because they didn't know he had done anything like this. And we don't know if he did it for other families. He could be an American Schindler, like quietly saving all these lives, but we don't know.
Because you said in the book that he said to them, do not tell anyone that I'm doing this.
We're assuming that's what happened because my grandfather never told.
Okay. Oh, you don't know that he said that.
I don't know for sure that, I mean, it's tough. We think that's what must have happened because he would have told. I mean, he told every other aspect of his rescue or his escape.
So that makes me think of something. So he is a great hero, and the book has a lot of heroes in it. Superman is one, and I think Jules is one, getting everyone out and all the brave things he did we can talk about. But Harry wasn't that great a guy, but he did do this. So it was just, that was an interesting fact that he did that. Oh, but he really screwed the creators of Superman. And that, so like, it's such a dichotomy because throughout the book, first he screws them just with a little bit of their contract, right away, it's a bad contract and they have nothing. But then over the decades, when they try to get money back, they basically don't get a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk
They're
about.
still suing. The family's still suing. I mean, they're still suing them, because Warner Brothers just keeps making movies, and they don't.
I remember reading about it in the 70s with Christopher Reeve movie, like that. They were in the news. That's when people first heard that they had been screwed over. But like, you're so angry at Harry for what he's doing to these two guys that created Superman and gave us Superman, and yet he did this, this great thing for your family.
Well, that's what makes Harry such a great character, to be perfectly honest, is he was incredible. I mean, he's all over the place. He's kind of a criminal, kind of a pornographer, kind of a pulp publisher, kind of stealing companies from other people, and then also doing a really amazing thing, completely selfless for people he didn't know.
Yeah. And people did love him. He was a real charmer, Harry. He was, definitely a people guy. Like people just loved Harry. And so it's I don't think it's a big surprise to his family that he would have done this. He helped people all the time, in the company. He would give people jobs all the time. And he apparently paid for Joe Shuster's eye surgery. Joe Shuster was pretty much blind at one point when he was older. And the rumor is that he paid for his eye surgery, but we don't know that for sure either. So.
And because we're so in love with Harry Donenfeld, I like to think that his partner was accountant who ran the business side of the company was more responsible for the screwing of Harry and Joe.
And so Superman plays a big part in the comic books. Were you both interested in comic books before, or was this just because it was in the story?
It was just
not at all.
I'm a Mad Magazine girl. That's it.
It was a pretty steep learning curve, we had to read a lot about the comics and read comics, and there was a comic archive at Columbia University. This guy Larry Ty had written a book about Superman a few years ago, and all his research was at Columbia. And so when we found that out, we were all excited. I went to Columbia. I got my MFA from Columbia. I was like, oh, great, we can do research at Columbia. And then the pandemic happens, so the library was basically closed. And so we had to deal with the librarian in the comic archive on Zoom. And so she would pick out things and show them to us, and we would tell her whether we wanted them or not. And she would make a copy. Like we would see her actually go to the copy machine and make a copy and then email it to us. It was insane. It was insane.
Like 1975. Like she was holding up every piece of paper in the box. Do you like this?
Oh my God.
Like 100 boxes.
Robert Caro said, turn every page, right?
Yeah,
turn
exactly.
Every page that you had to see every page.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to need.
Larry Ty did come to the Brattleboro Literary Festival when his book about Superman came out. But that's great that the archive is there for the next generation or next people to look at.
Yeah, he found great stuff, and his stuff leads to other stuff, and he's just an amazing guy, and just to have it out there for people, and his book was like a Bible to us too. So
the Superman attracted me. I am interested. I mean, I like Superman. I don't think about him much now, but I did like him when I was young. But enough that I read Larry Ty's book and invited him to the Brattleboro Festival because it's such a good book.
It really is. It's great. It's really well written. It's well researched. Yeah.
So how did you split the research? Did you do it together? It sounded like that part you did together on this, but how did you take certain parts, or did you do most of it together?
We did it together. It was really random, and we both read tons of Marilyn's books. We both read tons of Billy Wilder books, and we just shared information basically.
Yeah, Bonnie just kept shoveling stuff to me. I was reading stuff too and researching stuff, but she was like a crazy research machine. She was just kept sending me stuff. I was like, at one point, I was like, Bonnie, stop! You have to stop because I can't take anymore. Like I'm trying to organize everything, and figure out what the narrative is and what the story is. And she's like, okay, and she'd stop for a couple of days, and then it would start coming again. It was like the conveyor belt on I Love Lucy, with the chocolates on it. But yeah, it was amazing though. She was an amazing researcher, and it really made my job easier. It's the first time I ever wrote with anybody before. I always do everything myself, so it was a luxury to have her do all that research. And she did all of the family research. I mean, because a lot of the Jewish heritage stuff, you have to be related to look up a lot of that stuff. And so she went to the you tell them. You went to the DC Holocaust Museum and Yad Vashem.
Yeah, it was very helpful, but the Shoah tapes, you need to sign on as a relative in order to see them. stuff like that. But I called, you know, descendants. I knew their maybe grandparent, but I never knew the children. And I had to say like, oh, I used to know your grandfather, we're related. I have a few questions for you, and just get stories that way. But you know, I would say before this book process, I wouldn't have dreamed of calling a relative I didn't know. But it, you know, everyone was receptive. Everyone wanted to help, and everyone wanted to talk about their memories. So it was a really wonderful process. And I have new family members now.
I was just going to say, do you now have new family that you're in touch with?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're coming to readings
Especially
and stuff.
Faye's granddaughter.
Oh, cool.
Faye's family, all of them, they live in Texas, and they were all really excited about
Faye,
that.
for those who haven't read the book yet, Faye
Yes,
is
tell
the one.
them where-
Faye lived next door to Harry Donenfeld in the Bronx. And so she was the connection for Jules, the grandfather, for the sponsorship. So Faye went and asked Harry if he would sponsor Jules. So Faye's family is in touch with us.
So in that scene, you have her son who sees the mock-up of a Superman comic. Was it an early version or something? And he was very taken with it. And you said he was like a focus of one, but was that really like how, like, did that affect that? I just, when they saw him like it, that they did take
We
it.
don't know for sure, but we just know he was definitely there, and he was like 5 years old or whatever he was in the.
He told us the story. He's the person
Okay,
who
yeah.
called me a long time ago and said, "Did you know this?" And so he told
Oh,
me
wow.
the story.
Yeah.
Wow, so he
No
knew
longer
that
with
he'd been
us.
there. Yeah.
But he remembered it. He never forgot. It was so incredible in his life. And then
What a thing to see the first version, one of the earliest versions.
that drawing that we have in the book, there's a drawing of Superman that Joe Shuster
Yes.
did for Neil.
That's amazing.
It was for his bar mitzvah. So
And his brother wound up working at DC, you know, as a teenager. So there were all these overlapping connections. So it's sort of, it was almost like circumstantial evidence in a way that it all did really happen. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have a smoking gun, that we didn't have the form that Harry had not filled out, because a lot of that stuff was destroyed during the war. But you know, these interviews we did, and just all the little things that, you know, Joe Shuster had drawn this thing for his bar mitzvah, you know. And there's pictures of Faye at Harry Donenfeld's son's wedding, you know.
They were close. There's one point where you say that all the kids were told by Superman to bring your papers and recycle them for the war effort, and then you say, and that's why there's no copies of these early Superman comics, because they were recycled or whatever they needed.
That's right.
To do.
my dad remembers bringing all of his comics around this time, you know, the early 40s, just giving them all away, because I always asked when I was young, like, where are your old comics? Can't we sell them for money or something? And and he said, no, I gave them all in. I was so proud to hand them over.
Wow.
Paper.
Wow, well, I guess that's why the prices got so high.
Yeah, there's not that many
If
of
they
them.
really had kept them, they wouldn't have been as high.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and so you have so many places. Let's talk about Germany, and that's like, where did you go there to research? You had people here to, you know, interview and all that. Where did you go to Germany?
Bonnie wanted us to go to Germany right away. Of course, everything was closed because of the pandemic, you know, and so we couldn't go. So the book was almost pretty much written by the time we went to Berlin. We had a rough draft, and Bonnie was really pushing. She said, we got to go as soon as it opens. We got to go. The day Berlin opened, like, she made the plane reservations, and we went, and it was an amazing, amazing trip. And we went from building to building that Jules had lived in, her grandfather had lived in, where he worked, where he lived, where his relatives lived. We went to the Wannsee Villa, which was right near the beach where he used to go to when he was young. And of course, if you guys know about the Wannsee Villa, that was where the final solution was thought up by the Nazis. All these crazy connections were made. And so being in Berlin on the ground just gave us all that detail that you see in the book. You know what I mean? Like, I know what the hallway looked like where he lived. I know what the stairway, I know what his doorknob looked like, you know, because I actually saw it and touched it. So it made all the difference. Berlin was.
What's moving about the book is you can picture these people in Germany. It's not just that you picture them in New York, which we know, and Marilyn Monroe and Superman comics. You can picture them, their whole family, their in-laws, you know, Edith's parents who didn't make it. Like, you can picture their life there because of the way you did that. So that's really moving and important to the book, I think. Even though it looks like it's about Superman.
It was important also to show that before Hitler, they were living great lives, just totally
Right.
normal, regular lives. They were just like us, as they say. And then
Yeah.
everything, the laws started changing so that Jews were prohibited from doing anything or going anywhere or owning anything. It was just slow. It was slow over the years between 33 and 38.
Yeah.
But another thing about
So-
going to Berlin is, I'm sure you know, most of the buildings were bombed in Berlin. It was a disaster.
Right.
But just completely coincidentally, all the addresses we had to visit on our little list of places to go, they were all
Yeah.
still there. Just
I don't
they
think
all-
I don't believe in coincidence.
They were waiting for you to come back.
It was a miracle.
it was a miracle.
It was a
I-
publishing miracle for me. I didn't expect anything to be there. It was, and everything was there.
For
Even
me,
Billy
the
Wilder's
hardest-
house where we lived in Berlin, we saw,
Wow.
everything.
For me, the heart of the book is when he comes back into Germany. I mean, just like the most amazing thing of all of these things, despite the coincidences of everything else, and it's brushing with Superman and those creators and Marilyn Monroe, the getting into Germany and then the getting out. And I don't know if you want to tell those two stories now, but it's just incredible. Like you're thinking about New York, and then suddenly you're like, oh my God, look what's going on over there.
Yeah, I'm going to set it up, and then Bonnie, you take it. So
Okay.
Jules comes to New York to find a sponsor. Faye is there, right? Faye does the asking for him of Harry Donenfeld. He gets the sponsorship, and then he has to go back to Berlin, 1938, to get his wife and 2-year-old daughter, which is Bonnie's mom. So Bonnie, you take it from there.
Okay. So he gets off the ship and walks out, and they're the Nazis, Gestapo, brown shirts. I'm not sure what they were, lined up, and you had to walk down and show your papers and get stamped and be let back into the country, just like going through customs in America. But his passport had a big J on it for Jew, because they all had to have that. And they were like, what are you doing? We don't want Jews here. We want you to go away. What are you trying to do? And he made up, because he couldn't tell the truth. I left my wife and daughter to go get a sponsor, and now I'm coming back to get them so we can leave again. So he said, I'm Clark Gable's agent, and if I don't get back into Berlin, his next movie won't get to Germany, and the Fuhrer will be mad, because the Fuhrer loved Clark Gable. I don't know where he got this
How he came up with that? Amazing.
He
He was a furrier, by the way. He was a furrier. He was not an agent.
He has nothing to do with the film business, despite having shot that home movie. Nothing to do with Clark Gable. So it was just completely out of the blue,
That's
and
so
it worked.
brilliant.
And they
So
let him in.
brilliant.
Sometimes
And then-
the bigger you lie, the better it is.
Sadly, we know that for other ways too nowadays. But
Right.
But so then when he was leaving, he gets back there and he thinks, I'll sell my business, I'll be with the family. We'll try to, maybe they'll want to come with us. But nobody wanted to come, basically. And he's just there thinking about selling the business. And then in his building, I'll let you tell what happens.
Yeah, the building that we were actually in Berlin.
Yeah.
Well,
wow.
I want to tell you how we
Down the
found this out.
staircase.
Actually, it's kind of amazing. We had been interviewing Bonnie's mom for months, and one day we were talking to her about some other thing, and we said, it's kind of a crazy coincidence that you guys left Berlin the day before Kristallnacht. Is when the Jews were completely attacked, and she's like, well, it's not a coincidence. Like, there's that Gestapo guy in our building who told us that we had to go because the attack was coming. We were like, and Bonnie had never heard that story. And I was like, what? And it's like, oh my God. So every time you interview someone, you get another nugget, So yeah, so they, they were taking their time to leave. And then some guy comes up to Jules and says, you need to go. There's an attack coming. Like, you need to leave
And he
now.
says, I'll go next month. I'm going to go.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
worry.
Like, no, you need to
And
go
then he
now.
says, "Oh, tomorrow, like right now." Did he leave that day or the next day?
I think they left that day. Yeah, that day. Because
And
they
you
had all their
drive.
papers. They were ready to go. They had everything.
And,
They could go.
People had been disappearing. Like, on the word on the street, all of a sudden a family would be gone, or the father would be gone, or the mother would be
Mhm.
gone. People had been disappearing. So when you in that environment, if somebody, especially the enemy, which is
Right.
also fascinating, that the Gestapo, their job was basically to kill Jews. But this Jew was okay. This guy, he thought he could save. So it was more the strangers, the anonymous people that he hated. The individual people he liked. And he saved his life.
And Jules was a likable guy, right? I mean, everybody loved Jules. He was a real charmer. So yeah, they left that night. So.
And I was telling my husband about it, how he drives, I forget where they drove to, and then he has to leave his car, right? He just leaves his car. And you write that it was hard to, I mean, if you, even that little detail, if you think about just getting out of your car and leaving your car, I mean, it shows you just, he did it, but it's like hard to just do these things, like walk out your door and let's say, and just walk out. Like it's your apartment with all your stuff, and your car at the loading dock of the.
Yeah, and even that
dock.
detail that came from one of Bonnie's sisters. We were talking to her about the car, and she said, "Oh, I remember Opie. They called him Opie. That means grandpa.
Yeah.
I remember Opie talking about how sad he was when he had to leave the car at the dock when he got on the boat." It was like,
it's really not the point, but it's like I almost think it shows you just how hard, because it's so against how you live.
It's those details that make the story great. I mean, that's what makes it sing, you know.
Show you what people have to do this, and it's pretty scary too for all of us.
Yeah.
But just to think about. I wanted to ask you, are there things that you left out that you couldn't put in the book that you wish you had put in that you want to tell us?
Ooh.
You know, from your research, or were you able to get most of it in?
We crammed most of it in there.
Yeah, I can't think of something.
There was the KKK stuff. There was more to that. There was that whole Superman KKK story. I had a whole chapter about that. I don't know if you remember. We just mentioned it in passing, but in the summer of 46, you know, the war was over, and so Superman wasn't fighting the Nazis anymore, and so he had to find new villains, right, to fight. And so on the radio show, he was fighting the KKK. And so I mentioned it in passing, but that was a whole chapter, but it had to go because it was just too much. Sometimes it's just too much. It's too much of a tangent. You know, it needed to be mentioned, obviously, it's a KKK, but there was a whole chapter about that. And the radio shows, you can Google it and find out. You can listen to them, actually. You can hear them.
Because somebody infiltrated the KKK, right, Helene?
Right.
But the other thing that was really cool that came out of that, which now I can't remember if it's in the book or not, was that because of Superman fighting the KKK, little boys switched from being cowboys and Indians to being the KKK as the bad guys and the cops as the good guys. So the men who were in the KKK came home, saw their kids portraying them as the bad guys, and it was kind of the beginning of the end of the KKK, because culturally they became a bad thing.
That was not in the book. It got left out. So
Right.
yeah, that's a nice tidbit. That would have been nice, but it was just too long. We had to cut stuff.
But I love the idea of coming home and being horrified by your child portraying you as the bad guy.
Right. So I see a question in the chat that says, and about what the connection or the similarity. Obviously, it's not about Michael Chabon's Cavalier and Clay. Like a lot of people said that element, or just. It's not really the same, but it's, what do you think about that?
Michael was inspired by Jerry and Joe's story. I mean, I've never spoken to him personally, but I'm just assuming Michael was inspired by their story and then made up everything else.
Yeah, there's a character in there that's like Harry, you know what I mean? But this is the real version. That was the fictional version.
Yeah.
So.
And then let's see, another question that says, what's this, Bonnie, glancing over some of your past credits, what's the story behind 45? You Can't Spell America Without Me. What is that?
You Can't Spell America Without Me is a book I made with Kurt Anderson and Alec Baldwin. The Trump parody memoir. So if Trump wrote a memoir, and there are tons of pictures in it of Alec as Trump. It's very, very funny. I highly recommend. It was a New York Times bestseller too.
Wow.
Bonnie's a book designer. So
yeah.
Bonnie designed the book.
I was just going to say, you must have designed the cover for this beautiful book.
And everything, the inside, the pictures, everything. She did it all but our book as well as this one.
I have seen that. All right. Well, wow. Okay. Speaking of your design skills and abilities, on your website, maybe Jerry will put it in, there's a video with Bonnie talking about her design and all that she's done, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. And I have to say, I did connect with the Partridge Family being that, and I even watching that, I was like, oh, I did always love that, but I didn't know the beauty of it, the colors and the design, like, so what was amazing to me is that you saw that around this, the same time, and we're like, wow, this is like something I'm going to do, but I just thought it was cool, and I liked it. But
it really is, though. The Partridge Family, Mary Tyler Moore Open, really, I was just like, must make that.
And how did you know how to go make these? Like, where did you, I mean, from watching to getting that, how did you get there?
I studied graphic design in college. I mean, but it took me a long time to learn what graphic design was and all of that stuff. And then after college, I called MTV and I said, can I work there? And they let me. So I learned everything there at MTV Networks. And then I opened my own company when I was 30.
Wow. So if people go to that, you'll see a nice video where you explain all these things and all your influences and what you've done. Everyone will be amazed that what they've seen, so much of your work. You're just like, oh my God, every single thing we've seen. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, how does the rest of your family feel about this? Like when you're, I mean, I'm assuming they like it, but like just the extended family, what's it like for them to have this in a book?
I mean, everyone really loves it. It's a beautiful telling of my family's story and what happened to all these different people. And like me, most people didn't know about each other. So you knew your, parent or your grandparent, but you didn't know your great aunt or great uncle's story. So now my whole family knows everything, which is a really nice thing.
Yeah, and people are coming out of the woodwork you didn't even know, right? We were we had our launch a couple weeks ago, and a couple of family members that you didn't even know came, right?
That were on my grandmother's side. So they saw freedmen and it was crazy. They were from Denmark. Like, it's just, wow. So it really is happening like that. People are getting in touch who we're related to, but had no idea.
Did you do your family tree on Ancestry?
I built my own family tree because I'm a designer, but I did use Ancestry heavily.
No, the reason I ask about that is the Ancestry family tree, if it's all there, like they can't read the living people, but you connect with people, see it, like if they're doing that research. I did the funniest, I put my husband's family, just his parents, like, and grandparents. I didn't really want to do it. I just put it on there. I wasn't working on that at my own side. And one day a woman wrote me and she said, are you, is this the right family? It was. And she basically filled in the whole tree and sent me all these pictures. So it was like a calling card that I had put there. That's why I'm saying Ancestry.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah.
As your other people are doing it, they find you. And the funny part was that then I was considered in his family like this genius of Ancestry, but I had done no work on that. But she had connected with me, and then I filled it in and gave it to them. So I was just wondering.
They give you
well, if they were looking for that person, they would find it, and then they would say, "Oh, I can help you with that." So
it's all there. It's all on Ancestry. Absolutely, I love it.
Yeah, and did you design yourself a great family tree? Like that must be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went down a very deep rabbit hole with Ancestry. I had to pull her out by the feet sometimes. She'd be gone for a few weeks.
I understand having done.
She kept sending me updated versions of the family tree.
But also of like the silliest things, like Harry went to Havana, Cuba on this day on this boat.
Yes,
fascinating.
Yeah,
like, it manifests. The ship manifests.
Yeah.
So I just want to get back to the book and like go on that topic, obviously. Can you talk about the connection between the comic books and the pornography? What was the situation with both of those?
Well, I think basically Harry had been, pornographer is probably a strong word. I mean, he published these girly pulps like in the 20s, and into the 30s. They were sort of like, there'd be a drawing of a woman with no shirt on or whatever. It wasn't gross or anything. But they were pretty popular in the 20s. Like a lot of people bought them. They bought them in drugstores and things. And but he kept getting in trouble for it, because it was considered pornography at the time. And so he was arrested. What's that?
Yeah. I was using the word because I think did you call it that in the book or not really?
We call them pulps. We call them pulps. The girly pulps, they call them.
Smooshes.
But smooshes was the other word for it. Yes, smooshes. Yeah. And so he was, he'd gotten arrested a couple of times for indecent literature, whatever the term was. And the judge had told him if he got arrested a third time, he was going to go to jail. 3 strikes and you're out, And so just around the time that they published Superman Action Comics, he had gotten in trouble again. And so I think they sort of went in the comics direction to get away from the pulps. This guy that she mentioned before, the accountant Jack Leibowitz, who was his partner, was really pushing Harry to get out of that pulp business, the girly pulp business. And so they saw this potential in the comics, and so they sort of changed gears and went in that direction, and then sort of eventually left the pulps behind. So the comics were sort of just a way to not get arrested, I think.
Keep the presses rolling, keep the printing presses, which they owned, running. They needed something to print and sell. They had a big company.
And then they were sent to the army, right? They were sent to the people in the army.
He made
the comics.
Harry and Jack made deals with FDR to make comics for the soldiers because they would read them. And they weren't reading the material that the army was providing. So they put the material in comic book form, and then the soldiers would read it.
Yeah. Again, there were paper shortages, but they were able to print their stuff because they made these deals with FDR, to make these comics for the soldiers overseas. So Harry was a mover and shaker. He knew what he was doing. And comic books were like the most popular magazines during the war. I mean, they were just number one by a long shot. Everybody's reading comics. So
what about a movie or TV of this book? Is that something that's gonna happen?
We're working
on it.
I know, I'm sure you're working. You can't really.
We can't say anything, but we really would love it to be limited series, because there's a lot of stories to tell in here.
Yeah, there's so many strands, I feel like a movie wouldn't really be able to do it justice. You kind of need a few nights.
And did you have to storyboard it? Because you do have all, like, the organization must have been hard, because it doesn't just go straight with one character. It goes back and forth.
Well, like I said, Bonnie just kept throwing stuff at me. And so I knew like where stuff was, and I would take the information she was sending and just stick it in that chapter and then get back to it eventually. You know what I mean? So I knew in my head where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I did definitely have a structure. I mean, originally we started chronologically. We always had that opening chapter where Jules is going to shoot the footage of Marilyn Monroe. It's that night in 1954. And then we go back in time and go back to the 30s. And the original draft, we had going back to like when he was born, Jules. So this beginning was too slow. And so we wound up cutting the first few, like 5 or 6 chapters. A friend of Bonnie's, who's an editor, had read it. And he was like, this is too slow. I think you need to cut the first 5 chapters.
Wow.
Bonnie, he told Bonnie, and Bonnie was afraid to tell me, because I had written all this stuff. But I'm a professional, and I've written several books at this point. And so as soon as she said it, I was like, yes, that's the solution. Like, because it was slow and it wasn't working. I was like, why is this not working? And it was just that. So we cut right to the 30s. We pick it up right when Hitler's around. Dive right in. 33. That's it.
So I guess it's like an actor doing the backstory, like
it is exactly.
Right.
So I had to live through that backstory to know who Jules was. I had to know about his childhood. I had to know about his parents, where they lived. I did all of that research, but I didn't need to tell it. It was just in.
That must be because you really feel him as I said, the families and his in-laws. He was close to his in-law, like all these connections, which you don't. Like it's there, and I did feel it. So maybe I do feel like
it's there. It's just subtle, Yeah.
Also, everyone around him, everyone we spoke to, I mean, everyone loved him. Like he was a really special person. I'm not just saying like I had a great grandfather. Like everybody really rallied around him and knew how special he was, and how selfless he was, and how much empathy he had for others, and how he wanted to make the most of every day for everybody, and the whole thing. Like, so he was really appreciated and loved, and everything, we have like for his, the messages on his birthday or his anniversary or whatever that I was able to share with Aline. She could see everybody's personal notes to him and understand how they felt. So it was really helpful. So it wasn't just me saying, no, he was great.
He's a great guy.
So he had lost so many people and had such harrowing experiences. So when you knew him, did you feel that at all, or was it not? Like, how did he seem? You said he was so up and that everything.
He was up. He was always up, always the life
so
of the party. And
that people could be like that.
He only told the good stories. He told
Wow.
the story of Clark Gable. He's told the story, he told the stories that were successful. He didn't talk about saying goodbye, or
Yeah.
losing people, or when he found out someone was killed, or he didn't
Yeah.
ever tell those stories. Nobody did.
That it might be too much. Might have been,
Yeah.
and you had to keep going. Just that reminded me though of the story where he is on the line to get the papers, and he has your mom and is 2 years old, and he's not moving, and he's just worrying. I'll let you tell what happened and what he did, which is also
They're
amazing.
online. I don't even remember what the paperwork was for. Do you remember? It was for the visa, maybe? Yeah, it was the visa. It was one of the last things they had to get, and they were online, and the line wasn't moving. And so he had a 2-year-old daughter, and Bonnie's mom, and he pinched her and made her cry. And his wife is like, "What are you doing? Like, why?" The kid's screaming, but everybody in front of them lets them go ahead of them because this baby is crying.
Kept pinching her a few times, you said, or who knows? If
And kept doing it, yeah. And then had a lollipop, gave it to her, and then took it away, and she cried again. And they moved up again.
It was tense. I mean, this is 1938 Germany, and these are all people who know they have to get out. It's very tense. And as you know, a screaming baby does not make things better. So people were thinking, get that baby out of here. Just let them go.
Right.
And after they got their visa, the window closed.
I know that when I read that, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's the story he told. Yeah.
So did you say they were, because of his coming and Harry saving, it's 22 people in your family that survived?
Yes.
Well, the original, what, 6?
Yeah, there were originally 7
right,
left Germany. And then since then, the descendants
Right.
make for a total of 22 people who wouldn't be here if it were it not for Harry.
And then they'll continue with their descendants. And who was the other person that came, the 7, because your family was 3?
My grandfather's sister, her husband, and their 2 sons. But they didn't leave altogether. They actually left earlier. They left in September. My grandfather was waiting a little longer, hoping that my grandmother's parents would say, okay, we'll come.
Yeah. And they did not sell their business, right? Because they didn't have the time to do that. But they often didn't let people take their money anyway, right?
No, you had to give like 95% of the money. And I think that people made deals with people who had worked for them to like take over the business and share profits or something. But those people were Nazis and they just took it.
Right. And how long did you take to write the book, from like, I guess, the article to, working on it?
Well, it's really solid 2 years of writing the actual book, I would say. Yeah.
And like 2 years in between with where we just, hung out.
Yeah, it was 2 years. And the thing about the 2 years was it was like pandemic 2 years, so we weren't doing anything else. I had no social life. I didn't go out. We didn't do anything. We just talked to each other and read stuff. So
because the research is so fantastic that you can see that the time paid off that you spent on it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun.
If someone said, how was your pandemic? We can say like, here.
This is what I did.
This is our pandemic.
You did well on it. The title, do you want to just talk about that, why you chose that title, The American Way?
You want me to? Okay.
Yeah, go.
I mean, it has many meanings. The most obvious where it came from is truth, justice, and the American way, which was Superman's tagline, if you will.
Motto.
And that makes sense. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. But then also when we consider each of the things discussed in the book, like immigration. So my family got in, that's the American way. Our family is saved. Lots of families didn't get in. That's also the American way. People died. And, everything has that. Marilyn going from rags to riches is the American way. But, dying of an overdose, a starlet at 36 is also the American way. So we were seeing both sides of everything. So it seemed like a kind of ironic title.
Yeah. Also the Jerry and Joe story too. That's part of the American way, right?
Absolutely.
They got this
great idea
character out into the world, Superman, but they got screwed. That's the American way because they signed a contract. How much more American can you get than that?
I know. And the music, like whenever you hear about musicians in the 40s and 50s,
oh, absolutely.
same thing. They sold it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Superman is a beloved character, and it is sad to think of, people love him, and so that they were so miserable, really, from that.
Yeah.
It really I almost feel like it was worse for them having created Superman and then not getting it than if they had never done that and gotten a regular job.
It
For
really, it
them,
really is
not for
tragic.
the rest of
It's
us.
a tragic tale, and they died pretty poor, and it is pretty awful.
Yeah,
I see in the Q&A, someone wants to know if Helena's still playing the drums.
I know.
I want to know
Ah,
Yeah, do you?
just
Tell
in
us
my
about
head.
that, your drums and.
No,
I read about that too.
my second book was about being a drummer in a rock band on the Lower East Side. I was in a band for a few years. And no, I have no time to play the drums. I'd like to play the drums because it gets out all my frustrations. And when I get angry about stuff, I can punch stuff instead of, punching the wall. But I haven't played the drums in a while, but I probably should start again. I think.
Now you have time, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't. What are you both
No,
working on now?
I definitely don't. Well, we're doing all press and tours for this book. And then my last book was about my family in Southern Italy. There was a murder in my family in the 1800s. I was actually at the Brattleboro book festival for that book a few years ago. And so I had gone to Southern Italy over 10 years to report it and wrote this book. It was called Murder in Matera, and it came out in America. It came out in France, but we didn't get a publisher in Italy. And so years went by, 5 years went by, and finally I got a publisher in Italy last year. And so it just came out in Italy. And so I'm going to Italy in May to do the tour for that. So poor me, I have to go to Italy for 2 weeks. So yeah, so I have no time to play the drums.
Is there anything else you want to tell us? We're getting to the end. If there's anyone else has a question, put that in, or.
Yeah, time flies, man. I can't believe it's almost an hour.
But if either of you want to tell us anything more
I
about the
think
book.
the greatest thing to me about the book is that, we did have all these loose ends and they all got tied together. There's one point where I was worried. We had the connection between Jules and Marilyn, right? And we had the connection between Jules and Harry. But we didn't have a connection between Marilyn and Harry. And so there's this little gap, and so I was like, there's got to be something there, so we just kept digging, we kept researching. And one day I was reading a book about Marilyn Monroe, and the very last page, it was like after the index and everything, it was very, very last page. I could have easily not seen it. There's a picture of her posing in 1946 with the covers of the magazines that she had been on that year. And most of those magazines on her body, and it looks like she's not wearing any clothes, but I'm sure she's got underwear on. Those magazines are Harry's magazines. And when I saw that picture, I almost had a heart attack. Like, I was like,
on every page. This is the thing, right? You have to turn every
yeah,
page.
exactly. So I called Bonnie immediately. I texted her the picture from the book. And that picture is now in the book, actually. Bonnie got
I saw the picture because the audiobook has a great PDF. So if anyone wants to listen to the audiobook, you still get to see all the pictures.
Oh, I didn't even
seen it.
Yes.
We're gonna do that.
Yep. Check it out. And if you can't see how to do it, just write how to look at PDF on Audible, which is what I had to do.
I was wondering about the pictures, how they were going to do that.
The amazing thing is she does not look like Marilyn Monroe. I stared at that picture. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't look like Marilyn Monroe.
She wasn't Marilyn Monroe. She wasn't.
It was
She
amazing.
was still Norma Jean.
I know. But it was Norma Jean, but I couldn't even see much of a resemblance, like barely, I thought.
She was a kid, yeah.
I don't know.
The other
I
thing,
mean, I guess it made me think how much is done on people to make them
True.
Marilyn. Right. What were you going to say, Bonnie?
it's also a love story. We haven't talked about this at all yet. It's a love story because of my grandparents' devotion to each other. It's really beautiful. So on top of all this other pop culture stuff and Holocaust stuff and political stuff, it's a love story. And the book overall is very uplifting. It's not like most books that deal with the Holocaust, which make you want to go into a dark corner and cry. It makes you feel hope, actually, which is a weird thing, I know, but it's true.
Yeah, it's because of Jules. I mean, he was such a great guy and he helped so many people. Once he came to New York, he was just this wonderful person in the community. I mean, he brought people together and he helped people constantly. And so he was sort of a superhero, you know, without a cape, as Bonnie likes to say. And so that's the hopeful tale at the end. You know, it's really Jules' story.
you even got Trump in there because of his being,
I
well,
know.
things falling off the building that was being built next to his apartment. And as you said, you described this building being built very poorly and very dangerously. And literally, didn't you say like some of the terrace fell off onto the ground?
And one of the guys, one of the
I-
builders fell off. One of the construction
and
guys fell off.
Yes, and yes, very graphically describe what happens to that. That's
Yeah.
like to him. But like I was like, is this what whose building I think this might be? And you will all find out. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I was wondering how you, because I knew that it was Trump's building, right? So I was trying to set it up so you didn't completely know, but you might have an idea, you know.
I only as it got more and more. I just thought maybe this is who it's going to be.
It was so good to be able to put that in this book where it doesn't really have a place, but it fit perfectly. It's right.
It does, because he was being, it was ruining his home.
Exactly. It was one of the many fights he took on.
And one of the people that was
people don't know what we're talking about probably. Jules lived on the street where Trump built one of his first high rises, and it was a disaster of a building, and Trump was Jules was fighting it. And so we got it in there.
And so pieces of the building, aside from a man falling and dying from the building, also pieces of the building were just falling.
Yeah.
I wanted, are you so I know maybe you're not, because you didn't say this, but are you considering working on another book together? Someone has asked. And it seems like you guys might enjoy that. Find something.
I would love it. I mean, it was great. It was a great ride. I'd do it again. I've got to figure out what we're going to write about, though.
I know. I don't know. We don't have a subject.
Right, I get it.
She wrote books about her family, and then she ran out of her family and came to my family. But I think I've explored all the stories in my family at this point, so I don't know what else we'd write about.
Oh, this is a good question. Someone said, I don't know if we can show the picture. Well, it says, can you show us the picture from the book? Jerry, do you have any of the pictures? I know Bonnie had sent us.
Yeah, let's show some of them.
We'll try to do that in a minute.
The Marilyn pictures or the pictures I sent?
The pictures from the book, but anything from the book. Let me just see how I would.
You can definitely show the pictures that I sent over.
Yeah, let's see those.
If Jerry has it, I can also go to that. Actually, I could show the whole thing that I.
Oh, here we go. Oh, there's Marilyn in the magazines.
And so everyone who we can't hear from, but what do you, I mean, her face does not look like Marilyn.
Well, she's young. She's still a kid.
I know, but I really studied it. I was like, wow. Because then like the picture that he took of the night on 61st Street, just, that's the iconic Marilyn that we know. We thought
she wasn't even a blonde yet. She still had auburn hair.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jerry, I don't know if you have any more there to show, but I think we have to stop in a minute anyway. But I could see if I could get. Yeah, I don't know if I can do it quick enough to get all those pictures from the PDF. But I don't know if Sandy was gonna, let's see if there's another question or two. Yes, oh wow, you were here in Brattleboro in 2017.
Yeah,
Sandy.
That's when it came out. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how I wound up here, because I loved the Brattleboro Festival, so I reached out to Jerry. So.
Oh, that's great. So the pictures are in the book, or if you get the audio, that's where they're. And here I think Sandy's back to. And
show the cover.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Jules. That was Jules and his wife, Edith.
Oh. Yeah, show the book cover.
The cover's so beautiful.
You have the book? Does anybody have the book?
I have the book.
Yeah, we got them all over the place. You got it?
There you go.
That's the cover.
Perfect.
And on the back it says, with special appearances by Joe DiMaggio, Clark Gable, Arthur Miller, Frank Costello, Albert Einstein, Hugh Hefner, Howard Hughes, Walter Winchell, Jesse Owens, Jack Dempsey, Bess Meyerson, Fritz Lang, Margaret Sanger, Charlie Chaplin, Marlena Dietrich, and more.
Wow, that's true.
An all-star cast.
I know.
And you said in the book that Jules looked like, people thought he looked like Albert Einstein.
When he was
later,
he was an old man. I mean, he had white, crazy hair, the mustache,
big mustache,
like a little white hair on his face, and he wore, seersucker suits and suspenders and bow ties, and
he rode a bike too.
He rode a bike.
Oh wow.
So yeah, he was often mistaken for like you know, that crazy Einstein picture where he has his tongue
Yes.
out, that everybody, he looks like that.
Well, he would love it that you did this, I'm sure, you know.
He was expecting it, I think, right? He told you they had to make the movie of his life. It was going to be called The Signature, which had to do with that signature from Harry, you know.
Oh, this is
Oh,
when I was
wow.
like in my 20s. He was like, you're making, because I worked in television. So he was like, oh, you
Yes.
work in television. Now you'll make the movie of my life.
Wow, he was right. He did. I mean, the book, but you know, maybe the movie too.
One day, one day.
But even the book, I mean, he would have
Yes.
loved that, and your whole
Yeah.
family would have loved
And I wish I could have met him. I'm sad that I didn't meet him. I feel like I know him, but
You do.
I had a bad grandfather. So this makes up for all the bad stuff my grandfather did.
Which you can read about in her book.
My first book is about my family in Jersey City, and my grandfather's on the cover as a kid. And he was a murderer, and he tried to kill us when I was 5. So that's
Oh my
fucking
God.
So this is sort of like
A
coming
different
full
kind of
circle for
story.
me, you know.
I'll have to go to that book next.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to see. Hey, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Bonnie and Helene and Jenny. God, what an amazing story. So we have 2 virtual events coming up in the next month. On Wednesday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. We have an Author Fest event with Simon & Schuster featuring 2 New York Times best-selling authors. Laura Dave, author of the #1 instant bestseller, The Last Thing He Told Me, and Rebecca Searle with her bestseller, One Italian Summer. Both books are going to be out in paper this month, and they're perfect for the beach. And then on Friday, April 14th, the Literary Cocktail Hour will present Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author David Marinus with his latest book, Path Lit by Lightning, The Life of Jim Thorpe. Until next time, everybody have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
Bye.